sheriff is near!
Blazing Saddles was not just a Western parody, it was an atomic bomb dropped on Hollywood's sense of decency. Mel Brooks dared to torch every taboo the industry tiptoed around. Racism, sexism, censorship, nothing was sacred. Behind the camera, the chaos was as explosive as the jokes. Actors clashed, executives panicked, and Brooks stood at the center like a ringmaster at a circus of madness. What audiences saw was hilarious. Today we saddle up for 20 weird facts about Blazing Saddles. The studio wanted to burn the negative. When Warner Brothers executives first screened Blazing Saddles, they were horrified. The film used racial slurs and mockery so freely that studio heads demanded it be shelved forever. One executive reportedly shouted that the negative should be burned before anyone saw it. Mel Brooks refused. He argued that the movie wasn't racist. It mocked racism itself. He pleaded for a test screening. When audiences finally saw it, they roared with laughter so loud that the studio changed its mind overnight. What executives thought would be a disaster turned into box office gold. In the end, it wasn't morality that saved the film. It was laughter louder than fear. Richard Pryor wrote it but couldn't star. Richard Pryor co-wrote Blazing Saddles, injecting it with sharp humor and raw honesty about race in America. He was Mel Brooks' original pick to play Sheriff Bart, but the studio said no. They feared his reputation for wild performances and substance use would sink the movie. So Cleavon Little was cast instead. Pryor was crushed, but later admitted Little gave the sheriff a balance of dignity and sly rebellion that elevated the script. Still, the irony was brutal. A film built to destroy racist hypocrisy ended up silencing its own black co-writer. Pryor's fingerprints remain in every joke, every punchline, and every moment that dared to call Hollywood out. Gene Wilder wasn't the first choice. Mel Brooks originally hired actor Gig Young to play the drunken gunslinger Waco Kid, but fate intervened. On the very first day of shooting, Young arrived on set drunk and collapsed mid-scene. The production shut down instantly. Brooks panicked. Then he called Gene Wilder at midnight and begged him to take the role. Wilder flew out without even reading the script. His sleepy charm and soft-spoken delivery brought depth to the madness. The chemistry between Wilder and Cleavon Little was electric and instantly iconic. What began as a casting nightmare became a miracle. The Waco Kid was born from chaos and a hangover, and movie history was made. The censors lost their minds. Blazing Saddles faced 12 rounds of censorship battles. Studio committees wanted almost every outrageous line removed. The bean dinner was called obscene. The slurs were unfilmable, and even the horse-punching scene was condemned. But Mel Brooks refused to surrender. He told them real cowboys fart and racists exist. Why lie about it? The censors kept demanding edits until the studio finally gave up. They realized the jokes only worked because they were fearless. When the film premiered, audiences screamed with laughter while critics labeled it vulgar brilliance. The censors, who once called it disgusting, watched helplessly as it became one of the most successful comedies of all time. The fart scene made history. The campfire bean scene in Blazing Saddles changed film comedy forever. Before this moment, no major Hollywood production dared to use fart sounds on screen. Mel Brooks wanted cowboys to look real, dusty, sweaty, and human. So he created a full-on orchestra of flatulence using sound effects made from balloons leather and creative microphone work. Studio executives begged him to cut it, claiming it was too crude. Brooks refused. During test screenings, audiences laughed so hard the film had to be paused. Critics called it childish, but viewers called it genius. It broke the oldest rule of filmmaking, never show bodily humor, and turned it into art. It was dirty funny and utterly unforgettable. The title almost got changed when Mel Brooks pitched Blazing Saddles to Warner Brothers. The studio hated the title. Executives said it sounded too violent, too confusing, and too weird for a comedy. They suggested alternatives like Tex X and Black Bart, but Brooks stood his ground. He argued that Blazing Saddles captured the absurd firestorm of the story, a Western that burned down its own genre. For weeks, the name was debated in endless meetings. Brooks finally tricked them by sneaking the title into the promotional artwork and press materials before anyone could stop him. By the time they noticed, it was too late to change. The movie rode into theaters under the title Brooks Wanted, and the phrase Blazing Saddles became one of the most recognizable names in comedy history. Sometimes defiance is the only way to keep a masterpiece alive. Cleavin Little-faced real racism on set. Playing Sheriff Bart was groundbreaking but not easy. Cleavin Little dealt with racism even during production. Some crew members refused to take direction from him, while extras made snide remarks between takes. Mel Brooks noticed and exploded in anger, ordering everyone to show respect or leave. Little handled it with grace. He knew his character symbolized black empowerment in a genre dominated by white heroes. When the film premiered, audiences cheered for Bart, but behind those laughs was pain drawn from Little's real experiences. He once said making the movie was like living its story in real time. Hollywood wanted to laugh at race. Cleavon Little made them think about it too. Count Basie's scene wasn't planned. The legendary Count Basie cameo in the desert was not in the original script. It came from a wild late-night idea by Mel Brooks. During a location scout, he joked that the movie needed a jazz band in the middle of nowhere. The next day, Count Basie's orchestra actually showed up. They played in tuxedos under the scorching sun while horses galloped past. It made no logical sense, yet it became one of the film's most surreal and beloved moments. The scene captured everything Brooks wanted, absurdity colliding with genius. It was a wink at the audience saying even the desert has rhythm. Only Mel Brooks could dream up a gag that cool and that completely insane. Harvey Korman's villain was based on a real executive. Harvey Korman's character Hedley Lamar wasn't pure invention. Mel Brooks based him on an arrogant studio executive who constantly interfered with production. The man loved giving long, pompous speeches and took credit for ideas that weren't his. Brooks decided to parody him directly. Korman embraced the role, adding his own flair of theatrical madness. Every line dripped with fake sophistication and sly corruption. When the executive later watched the movie, he didn't realize he was being mocked and reportedly told Brooks the villain reminded him of someone he didn't like. That irony was delicious. Hedley Lamar became one of cinema's funniest villains precisely because he was drawn straight from Hollywood's boardrooms of ego and greed. Madeline Kahn's accent was improvised. Madeline Kahn's unforgettable performance as Lily Von Stupp nearly didn't happen. The studio wanted a sex symbol with a serious image, but Brooks insisted on Kahn. During rehearsals, she tried a sultry accent that sounded somewhere between German and exhaustion. Everyone laughed, including Brooks, who immediately told her to keep it. That half-asleep, smoky tone became her signature. She improvised many of her lines, turning them into comic gold. Kahn earned an Oscar nomination for the role, but what made it magical was her control of timing. Every pause was deliberate, every sigh a punchline. She wasn't acting out a parody, she was reinventing one. Her performance turned Lily from caricature to legend, proving that improvisation can create immortality. The horse punch was real. In one of the most jaw-dropping moments, Mongo punches a horse square in the jaw and knocks it out cold. Most people assume it was movie magic. But the stunt was filmed with a real horse and a real impact. Actor Alex Karras, a former football player, delivered the fake hit with precise choreography, but the sound effects and the horse's trained reaction made it look disturbingly real. Animal rights activists later criticized the scene, unaware that the horse had been trained to fall on cue. Brooks defended it as absurdist humor, not cruelty. Even decades later, audiences debate whether the scene went too far or was pure slapstick genius. Either way, it remains one of the wildest and most talked about stunts in comedy. History. Slim Pickens was afraid of horses. Ironically, Slim Pickens, who played the rough cowboy Taggart, was terrified of horses. He had been thrown off one during a rodeo years earlier and never truly recovered from the trauma. During filming, he asked for stunt doubles for nearly every riding scene. The crew laughed at the idea of a cowboy afraid of horses, but Brooks kept his secret out of respect. When Pickens did finally mount a horse for a close-up, his face showed genuine fear, which accidentally added to the realism. The man who once rode the bomb in Dr. Strangelove now flinched at a saddle, but that fear somehow made his performance even more authentic. It was another case of Hollywood irony, a cowboy who couldn't ride helping to make one of the greatest Western comedies ever made, The Candygram for Mongo. Scene almost didn't happen. The Candygram gag became one of the film's most beloved bits, but it almost got cut. Studio executives called it too silly even for Mel Brooks. They argued it slowed the pacing. Brooks begged to keep it, saying it perfectly captured the film's mix of stupidity and brilliance. He was right. The scene where Bart tricks Mongo with a box of explosives became a fan favorite. Cleavon Little improvised half his lines while the crew struggled not to laugh behind the camera. When test audiences saw it, the laughter was so loud that the next two scenes had to be re-edited because no one could hear the dialogue. The Candygram moment proved that sometimes the dumbest joke is the smartest choice. The town set was built in a real desert storm. The set of Rock Ridge wasn't built on a soundstage. It stood in the blazing California desert, where temperatures hit 110 degrees. Midway through construction, a freak sandstorm ripped through the site and destroyed half the buildings. Crews had to rebuild everything in just a few days, working through heat and flying debris. Mel Brooks refused to delay shooting, saying the chaos matched the spirit of the movie. Dust covered cameras, horses panicked, and actors delivered lines through gusts of wind. When you watch the final film, you can actually see sand blowing across the street in several scenes. It wasn't movie magic, it was survival. The storm that almost buried the set ended up giving the town of Rock Ridge its wild, authentic look. Mel Brooks played multiple roles in secret. Most viewers know Mel Brooks as the director, but few realize he secretly played several characters in the film. He appeared as Governor William J. Lepetomaa, as well as an Indian chief, and even provided background voices for random townspeople. Brooks didn't plan this at first. When actors dropped out or scenes needed quick rewrites, he simply filled the gaps himself. His performances were so outrageous that crew members often ruined takes by laughing off camera. The governor's name itself was a nod to a real French performer famous for his musical flatulence act, which made the fart jokes even more ironic. Brooks said later he wanted to remind people that the director wasn't above the chaos, he was part of it. His multiple disguises became an inside joke, proving that the madman running the circus was also its funniest clown. The ending nearly caused a studio mutiny. The movie's finale, where the cast breaks through the set walls and ends up fighting in modern-day Hollywood, was so bizarre that the studio begged Brooks to change it. Executives said audiences would be confused and angry. Brooks argued that was the point. The story was meant to collapse under its own absurdity. He wanted to show that racism, greed, and stupidity weren't confined to the Old West, but alive in modern society too. Filming the ending caused mayhem on the lot. Extras wandered onto real studio property, and security guards thought it was a real riot. When Warner Brothers saw the rough cut, they demanded a new ending, but Brooks refused. Test audiences loved it, and the chaos stayed. It was not just a finale. It was a meta-explosion of everything the movie stood for: madness breaking free. Dom DeLuise's cameo was completely unscripted. During the insane brawl at the film's end, a flamboyant director shouts orders at dancing cowboys. That was Dom DeLuise, and none of it was in the script. Mel Brooks invited him to visit the set, and when DeLuise arrived, Brooks handed him a megaphone and said, "Just act ridiculous." DeLuise improvised every line, turning the chaos into pure comedic gold. The crew was laughing so hard they had to redo the sound later because no one could stop giggling. His cameo ended up becoming one of the most quoted moments in the film. Brooks later said DeLuise was his secret weapon, a one-man wrecking ball of joy. What began as a random visit became one of the most unforgettable scenes in comedy. The film's insanity reached its peak, and DeLuise owned it. The premiere audience was terrified. When Blazing Saddles premiered in 1974, no one knew what to expect. The audience included studio executives, critics, and celebrities who had no idea how far Brooks had gone. The opening lines made the crowd gasp. Some walked out within 10 minutes, others laughed so hard they cried. Gene Wilder remembered that one man shouted, "This movie will end careers." Instead, it started a revolution. The shock value became the point. The movie forced people to face how absurd racism and hypocrisy really were. By the end of the screening, the laughter drowned out the outrage. Critics who came ready to hate it ended up quoting it for years. The premiere proved one thing: comedy can terrify and heal at the same time. It broke every Hollywood rule and survived. Blazing Saddles shattered every filmmaking law that Hollywood worshipped. It mocked religion, race, politics, and even the film industry itself. It used offensive language to expose real offense. It let chaos run the show, and somehow it worked. The film made over $100 million and became one of the most influential comedies ever made. Decades later, critics still argue about whether it could be made today. Mel Brooks says no, and he's right. The world changed, but the courage behind Blazing Saddles remains timeless. It wasn't just a movie, it was a dare to laugh at the things we fear most. The horses got more fan mail than the actors. After the film's release, Warner Brothers received hundreds of letters praising the horses. Viewers joked that the animals acted better than half of Hollywood. Brooks loved it so much he had postcards printed featuring the movie's stunt horses signed with hoof prints. The absurdity fit perfectly. Blazing Saddles wasn't about heroes or villains. It was about everyone surviving a world gone mad. Even the horses became part of that madness. In a film filled with genius stupidity, the animals somehow came out as the most dignified performers. Blazing Saddles began as a risky idea and ended as a cultural earthquake. It tore down barriers that no one else dared to touch. It mocked hatred and turned shock into enlightenment. Every fart, every fight, every fearless joke was a statement that art should never apologize for truth. It was not just a Western. It was the moment comedy grew teeth.